Ready?
Yep.
Okay. This is an interview at Jefferson Ferry Center, South Setauket, New York. It is the 5th of August, 2004, approximately 9 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My name is Martin Petersen, P-E-T-E-R-S-E-N, 11/26/22, in Jamaica, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering military service?
I had finished elementary school, high school, and 3 years of college.
Okay. Do you remember where you were, how you heard, and the reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I was at college. I think I was with a group of my singing buddies, and we heard it come over the television, the radio at that time, and we were much impressed. Of course, we were set back. It was such a surprise, you know. We were having a good time at college.
Okay. Did you get drafted or did you enlist?
Well, in December of 42, two of my fraternity buddies who were a year older they were breathing down their neck for being drafted. So they decided they were going to Albany and enlist in the Navy Air Force. So I went with them and went through the routine, the vigils and so forth. And when I got near the end, the psychologist or psychiatrist, whoever it was, said, "You're a year younger than these guys, you don't have to go in yet. So we're going to enlist you and send you back to college for a year, pick you up next year," which is what they did. So I began my active duty in July 1st, 1943.
Okay. Now, did you join the Navy because of your two friends, or was
I
there
joined
any
the
other
Navy
reason,
because I always was partial to the Navy, and I'd been reading Life magazine articles about the war in the Navy, and that influenced me in wanting to do that.
Okay.
I was not, when I went with them, I was not gung-ho on being in the Air Force. I just wanted to join the Navy, but that's the way it went.
Okay. So you went in December of 43.
I enlisted and was on the reserve in December of 42.
And then
It began July 1st, 43.
Okay.
During 1942, did you have to go through any kind of training or?
No, I went right back to
meetings?
college, and they picked me up the 1st of July 1943.
Okay.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
Well, since I was in a presumably potential candidate for officer, they sent me originally to Hobart William Smith College for 3 more months, and then I was in the Navy at that point. And it was a preparation. We had sort of boot camp activities, but studies as well. Okay. And should I want me to continue?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. From there, from July 1st to about October, I was there. Then we were sent to Norfolk, Virginia, in what would have been a boot camp, you know, down there, and stayed there until I was sent to midshipman school in Columbia, which was in December of 1943, right? I went through midshipman school at Columbia University, graduated there as an ensign in April of 44. Okay. Should I keep going?
Yes.
Okay. April of 44. And since I had a pretty good rating at midshipman school, I was elected to go to Diesel Engineering School, and they sent me to North Carolina State to Diesel Engineering School, where I was trained to be an engineering officer, and then sent to Little Creek, Virginia, where they were in the midst of sending out LSMs, which were the landing ship medium. She was 203 feet long, smaller than the LSTs, but a seagoing ship. And I was appointed to a crew there as the engineering officer. That crew was good enough to win the first prize over 20 crews or something that were going through there. We had the best record, so we got money to buy a moving picture machine, which we got to take aboard ship.
What were your duties as an engineering officer? What did you have to do?
As an engineering officer on this ship, we had 5 officers and about 60 men, 60 enlisted men. And the engineering officer was both a deck officer and an engineer. I had to stand deck watches. 3 of us stood deck watches. Captain didn't. And then my responsibilities during the day and other hours was to be in charge of the engineering force, which consisted of about 16 trained motor machinists, mates, electricians, and so forth, in charge of the power plants and all the auxiliary material and equipment on the ship. And so that's what was my duty during the service. So I had to stand a watch when we were underway. I had to stand a watch when we were in port. But my off-duty hours from standing the 4-hour watch were to be responsible for the engineering plan.
Okay.
Were the engines pretty reliable? Did you ever have much trouble with them?
We had 2 16-cylinder General Motors 278A engines, which developed 1,800 horsepower each, and they were reliable in the sense that they were good, but sometimes at sea they would crack a cylinder liner, and we'd have to shut the engine down, run on one engine, and change the cylinder liner on the way. We had extras. They apparently knew that was going to happen. We happened to have those. There was a diesel electric then driven ship, twin screw. They had about 3-foot screw, 3-foot diameter screws. The other group of LSMs that were made about half and half had a different kind of engine. They had Fairbanks Morse engines. They were different again. So, but we trained with those, but I never served on a ship with one.
Did you serve in the same LSM all throughout your time in service?
I commissioned it in Newark, New Jersey, and was on it. We took the ship from Newark, New Jersey to Norfolk, Virginia, Little Creek, where we trained on the ship itself. Now we're on our own ship. And after we went through that training for a month or so, we went to Rhode Island and picked up a whole deck load. The LSM was an open ship, not like the LSD. She was open the whole way. We picked up a whole deck load of creosoted, what would be considered telephone poles, which we were taking to Okinawa. And then we went from Rhode Island down to Virginia again, to Portsmouth, where we got some repairs. And from there we were sent to Panama Canal, where we got some more repairs. These ships were forever splitting little seams and so forth, so that they would, every once in a while, they'd have to be taken in, do a little welding here and there, or a pump would spring out a line or something of that sort, and we'd have to have that taken care of. So we went into to the Panama Canal, to San Francisco, stayed there for some repairs for a couple of weeks, and then we were sent out to Pearl. First, we stayed there for just a little while. Then we hit the islands going out, the Marshall Islands, Inuitak, and on out to Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. And our base of operations was primarily in those islands. We moved things from the ships to the islands, and from those ports to Okinawa, where we got rid of the piling. And I'm told that after they put the piling in, took the piling off, a couple of days later the thing was bombed and they were all blown up. So, kind of a fruitless carry, all these telephone poles.
Now, were you considered a plank owner because you had commissioned the ship?
Yes, on the ship, yeah, right, yes. And I was only one of 2 of us, I think there may have been a couple of enlisted men, I'm not sure, who were on the ship the whole time. And then after the war ended, we were traveling between Okinawa and China, Petersen and Tsingtao, China, and to Wakayama in Japan, taking supplies, troops, you name it. Our mission was either to go alongside the big auxiliary ships, and they would dump supplies of all kinds, and we'd take it to some beach for the Army or Navy, or vehicles. We took cranes and trucks and bulldozers and stuff like that into these islands. The CBs, the Army engineers, rode with us a lot and so forth, so we did a lot of that. And ferried between the islands back and forth. And when the war ended, after that, we were sent down to the island of Truk, where a lot of the Okinawans and others had been placed by the Japanese, and we repatriated them. We took them back to their original islands. So we did that for a little while, bringing back those people. And then eventually our ship was slated to be decommissioned, and we took it to the Subic Bay in the Philippines, where we laid it up, and I left it, and it was decommissioned there. At the same time, I left on July 3rd, I think, of 1946, yeah. And they flew me from the Philippines to Pearl Harbor, which was quite an experience, in what they called the Flying Boat Mars. It was the biggest plane then at the time. It was a seagoing amphibious plane to Pearl Harbor. Then I was put on a ship returning to San Francisco and then trained to New York. That's how I got back home.
Now, did you ever, when you ferried supplies and troops around, did you ever bring Japanese troops back to Japan from China or anything like that?
No, I don't. We didn't move any of those that I know of. No.
Okay. I noticed from reading the article that you talked about your interest was meeting people, these different peoples.
Yes, yeah.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I was training to be a teacher before I left, and I had that, the ministry in mind, okay? When I was in the first part of the Navy in Hobart College, they sent a message through that if any of the guys wanted to go into the chaplain school, they were taking applications, and the chaplain asked me if I wanted to go. I would like to, but then I said I really didn't join the war to spend the rest of my time in school, so I didn't do it. But I was always interested in it. So aboard the ship, I became the unofficial chaplain. It's like I had Sunday morning services aboard the ship, and I took the Protestant group. I tried to enlist one of the Catholic officers to do the Catholic group, but he never did. So some of them, I guess, came to my session. I'm not sure anymore. And I did that. And so I was interested in people. That's why I wrote the article that war was more than fighting, okay? And I used to take some of the enlisted personnel when we were on the beach to visit, like in China and Japan and so forth. And we walked the beaches. I met a missionary over there, whose name I still have in here, and he took us to their bombed out churches in China, and we stood up on the rubble of what used to be an altar and spoke to the people who came and sat on the floor with their dogs and their animals, and we sang Christian hymns, and they sang them in Chinese, okay? And it was, my feeling of it was they were just like fellow brothers and sisters. They didn't care about the war, didn't want the war. The big shots got us into the war, and we were all stuck with it, you know, but we were the same kind of people as they were. I met a doctor on the beach in Japan, walked the beach with him, one of the other fellows from the ship. He took us to his house, and his parents gave us tea and so forth, and we talked. But once again, you know, he was not big on fighting Americans. We weren't big on fighting Japanese, but we were all stuck with the problem, so that was it. That was very interesting. I enjoyed that. I also served as the unofficial photographer of the ship and took a lot of pictures, which I sent to crew members after the war was over. I own 25, 30 pictures representing stuff we had been through, and I have a large supply of that now, ship pictures and so forth.
Did your ship have any sort of armament on it?
Oh yeah, we had 4 20 millimeters and 4 50 caliber machine guns, and then on the bow we had twin 40s. They were shells about that long, with a twin action anti-aircraft gun. That was our heavy armament right on the bow. Yeah.
Did you ever have any encounters with the enemy?
No, we were lucky enough to get there at about the conclusion of the Okinawa War, so what we did primarily was that when the kamikazes would still come over, our ship would go out and make smoke around the big ships. You know, if there was a cruiser or a battleship or something, we would make smoke around them. And then we would anchor, and the LSVPs, the small troop carriers that went to the beach, would make smoke around us, and we'd sit there and hope that nobody could see through the smoke. So that was about the extent. I don't have any big war record in terms of fighting. No, that way, no.
How did your ship ride out storms? Were you there for any of the typhoons?
Oh yeah, we were there for all the typhoons. The dates I've forgotten. I got them all in there, but we rode them out. That was a pretty treacherous part of the activity, I can tell you, because as soon as a big typhoon was named and identified, we had to go out to sea, and there was a free-for-all out there because you couldn't see, and the waves were tremendous. You know, we'd go down in a deep trough and come up the other side, and then come down and bang. You know. And the thing about it that was treacherous was that everybody was out on their own. You couldn't see around you, and every once in a while some big ship would loom up in front of us or alongside of us or something of that sort, which was pretty bad. And they lost a lot of ships in those typhoons. Ships that didn't get out of the harbors were beached and abandoned and scrapped and so forth. But we've weathered the storms well enough that we will always be able to return, you know.
Where were you, and what was your reaction when you heard about the dropping of the atomic bombs?
We were on our way from Okinawa back to Pearl Harbor, reportedly to be fitted out of the rocket ship. They made 550 LSM hulls. 500 of them were LSMs with the standard open deck, which was used for all the things I told you about. But then they decided they needed rocket ships, so they were sending some of them back to have the decks put over the top of them, put rockets on them and rocket launchers, and change the configuration. Because those ships could go in close to the beach, fire their rockets, massive rockets. Some of the reporting I have here is that those rocket ships had more firepower on them for the size and weight of the ship than some of the bigger ships in the Navy. The first ones were fixed, so the ship would have to go in and turn in such a position they could fire the rockets. When they started manufacturing them as LSMRs, the landing ship medium rocket, they had all kinds of fancy configuration where they could move the rockets and so forth. So there were about 50 of those which served during that war and served also in Vietnam and on and through, you know. Our ships have a whole history book here of where they were disposed of after the war. Some were sunk to make reefs. Some were used as target ships. Some were put into ferry services. Some were sold to the Chinese. Ours was sold to the Chinese, I think, and sold to different countries around the world. Interestingly enough, I guess it's 10 years now ago, LSM Association, which is a national association of all LSMR people who served. One of the guys was traveling Europe, and he found an 3 LSMs in Greece, and he inquired about them, and the Greek Navy was willing to give them to us. So we had all kinds of problems with Washington. Finally, it all went through. Greek Navy gave us the ship free. We raised, as an association, $220,000 or something like that line to have a Russian tug pull the thing over here to us because it wasn't under power anymore, or it couldn't survive the ocean trip. And we looked up and down the East Coast to try and find a place for it, and people wanted it, but they weren't sure what the politics were they could get it. To make a long story short, it wound up in a museum in Omaha, Nebraska called Freedom Village, where they had a submarine on display on the beach, and they had a sub-chaser on the beach, and they were going to put our LSM on the beach. It got there, I may have the dates wrong now, but somewhere around the middle of the 90s, 95 or so, maybe 97. It stood alongside in the Missouri River, alongside this museum, and they never got it out of the line. We were much disturbed with that because we really wanted it to become a good piece. We had refitted it. I went out there, worked on it a little bit, and others did, and we had a sort of a museum memorabilia display and so forth, and a lot of people came to see it. But to make a long story short, the association finally was able to get it back from Freedom Park, and now we have moved it from there to Jacksonville, North Carolina, near Camp Lejeune, which is a Marine base, and the Marines are building a museum there, and are going to put it on the beach there, fit it out with tanks and trucks and stuff that it would normally be, and it'd be on display, which is much more desirous for us, because Omaha, Nebraska, we all scratched our heads and said, what's in Omaha, Nebraska, you know? So at least it's on the East Coast, somewhere near the Navy strongholds.
After you were discharged, did you make use of the GI Bill?
Oh yeah, I went back to Oswego where I was training, finished my degree there in industrial arts. That's how I got into engineering during the war. The engineers in the Navy were usually graduate engineers, or some of them were agriculture majors or people who were close to that kind of stuff. And that's how I got into it, because I was training to be an industrial arts teacher, a shop teacher. And I went back, finished that. Then I went to Columbia University, and I have 92 graduate credits from there. And I taught for 7 years. I taught shop for 3 years. I taught 6th grade. I taught 7th and 8th grade language and social studies. And I became a principal, assistant principal, and principal. And I retired as assistant superintendent of schools after 20 years or so.
Did you ever join any veterans organizations?
Yes, I didn't join any when I came out. I went while I was still in Oswego my last year, I joined the Naval Reserve unit there, and I went on a cruise with them, which was the only really reserve activity I did after the war was over. But I did not actively join either the VA or the American Legion when I got out, because I was busy with school and teaching, and I was teaching in Hofstra and so forth. And so I was too busy with church work. I had 4 daughters, and we were up to our ears in activities, okay? And so I didn't. But later on in life, I joined both the American Legion and the VFW as life members to support the organization more so than to run out every week to meetings, you know. But I've been in touch with them from time to time. Friends of mine are active in the groups and so forth. In my role after I got out of after I retired, I did 2 years of theological studies, and I'm a choral deacon at my church. And in that role, my primary function was visiting the homebound and the people in hospitals. and I visited with a fella who was colonel in the Air Force. Actually, I don't know, in the Air Force, I'm not sure. He flew helicopters. I'm not sure what branch that calls them to be. And I had the honor of pinning his gold star, his star as a brigadier general before he passed away. And then I did his funeral service because he was not a big active churchgoer, so he asked me if I would do the service, which I did. It's kind of interesting aside in my life, you know.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Yes, when the LSMR Association that I referred to, the national, started somewhere around 1989 in Norfolk, Virginia, and since I was not then active in the legions and stuff, I didn't get mailings that had to do with reunions and all this kind of stuff. So one of the fellows on a ship, just an interesting story too, when we were training in Norfolk, we ran out of an electrician, so I went to the billet home where they were putting together crews and so forth, and I happened to say out loud, I need an engineer, I need an electrician, I'm sorry. And this tall fellow came over and he piped, red hair, he piped up and he said, I'm an electrician and I want to go to sea. So we took him, okay? Well, he became my assistant when I was running the services on the ship. He ran the record player for hymns and stuff, okay? So when he came out of the Navy, he became a pastor, okay? And he subsequently became chaplain of this organization, this national organization. And he made a concerted effort to go through all the records he could find and wrote every place he could find to find members of the crew. And he got me through the Veterans Administration, I think. They could not tell him who I was, but they could tell him that if he could call the VA or something, they could find me. So he found me in 1994, and I've been going to reunions ever since. And there were about 10 of us at that time, 10 out of the whole crew. We didn't find the skipper yet, but myself and 4 or 5 other enlisted personnel. And then I got one of the other officers to come. He came once or twice and quit. Then I got stopped coming. I got the captain, and he's been coming ever since. So he and I, of the officers, have been going since '96 or so, pretty regularly. And we're now down to maybe 5 regulars. Some of the fellows died, some of the fellows were never reached, but we go every year and visit together. Some of them have their wives still, and so they visit with the wives. That's very interesting. Seen a lot of the country by going to these different reunions, you know.
How do you think your time in service had changed or had an effect on your life?
The service?
Yes.
I think it was invaluable. I would have stayed in the Navy if I'd had a better billet, I think. I would have liked it. But I couldn't see myself in the amphibious force for the rest of my life. But, you know, it was an experience. I was a kind of a person, since I went to the teachers' college, was interested, as I said, in people. And I was fairly mature. I knew in high school what I wanted to do. I didn't go to college figuring what'll I do. So I had some sense of maturity. But I was only 3 or 4 years older than most of the enlisted men, you know, that were taken in at age 17, you know. And I got in at about age 20, I guess it was. That's another interesting story. One of the young fellows that used to stand watch with me, he was a seaman, and we got to be good friends. When you're on these ships, small ship like this, and you're out at the sea and you're traveling at night on watch, and you're there with a couple of enlisted men, somebody on the helm, the quartermaster, the signalman, and this young fellow watching, you know, just look out. And we got to talking all kinds of things. And so I got quite friendly with him, took him places and so forth. But when we used to go to reunions, he said one time to me, you know, Mr. Petersen, he said, I always used to think of you as my father. And I was 4 years older than he was, you know. His wife still writes to me. I just got an email from her the other day. Okay, he passed away. But these are the interesting things, you know. I really enjoyed the crew. We got a good crew of people, very congenial. Some of the other ships I heard about, this fighting and so forth. There were guys that got drunk and so forth, but it was good. We had a Jeep aboard, which we traded a crate of eggs to some army outfit, and they gave us a Jeep, and we took it back to the ship and painted it navy gray and put numbers on it. We kept that, so whenever we were on the beach, we could go someplace. Otherwise, you were at the mercy of whoever you could get a hitch a ride from, you know. To get the mail, to get the movies, you'd have to hitch a ride. So we had that. Then one time we requisitioned and got what they called a crash boat. I'm not even sure what it was for. I know the Air Force had it or something, but then we converted it and put it on the ship, so we had an outboard and a way to get to the beach. Otherwise, all we had was like a 10-foot rowboat, and that's the only boat we had aboard. So it was a pain in the neck. If you anchored out, you'd have to wait for somebody that went by and flag them to get to the beach, you know. So it was a very interesting time. So you grew up, we enjoyed the people, and I learned a lot about people and things during my time in the Navy. I never regretted it. I would do it again if I had to. So, and one of the things that thrilled me in the later years at these reunions, it never seems to fail that someplace during the 5 days of our reunion, I'll get on an elevator and some 25-year-old or something will see us with our caps and so forth and say, "We want to thank you for what you did for us." That's always the most refreshing thing that I have ever had, you know. We didn't do anything but our duty. We went because we had to, but that some of these young people do appreciate it is very, very rewarding, you know. So, but, I mean, we went in the service because I went in the service because it was the thing to do, you know. That's the way it was, you know? And so that's about it.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Did you have any photos that you wanted
Beg your
to
pardon?
post? Did you have any photographs or anything there that you wanted?
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of stuff, yeah.
Well, if you could hold it up in front of you and talk about them, Wayne could focus on them.
All right. I have a picture book here with photos that I put together.
Okay.
I used to take to the reunion, and that these are the pictures I sent to the crew after the war was over, you know. So
Is that your skipper up in the corner?
that's me in the corner.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
The skipper's down here, and the other, that's me there, and the other officer. That's all that was left on the ship by the time we got near commissioning. Couldn't take pictures during the war, so you had to take them after the war was over. So we.
Is that your ship in the center there?
That's it. Yeah, that's when it was decommissioned. They had already taken the guns off of it.
I'm getting a little glare off the light. Yeah, right there is good. If you can hold it there. Let me just kind of focus in on it a little bit and get the whole thing in there. Okay, 293. Alrighty, you got it.
Okay.
Yes.
So it has all the pictures of stuff going through the war. The other thing I'd just like to show you, if it's all right.
Sure.
Got the time for just a minute?
Yes.
Just let me, this from here. Now that's from here. This is the book I referred to in that article or the material I sent you. I'm not sure which one it is. That's volume 1. This is volume 2. These are books that were put together and printed about the LSMs and the LSMRs. Is that glaring back at you?
Yeah, a little bit if you can. So, yeah, that's good right there.
Volume 1 and Volume 2, they were done in the mid and late 90s.
Okay.
Are those still available, or?
They are, yeah. As a matter of fact, I wrote, I was going to tell you about. This is the one that has my article in it. It also has every guy that sent in a picture and a little story about themselves, picture in the service and a picture at the time, you know. And they're in there. Then there's a lot. It's not just that. There's all these stories of activities during the service that the guys put together. And in the back, or someplace here, in here, it shows the what I was telling you about, where each of the ships wound up. It says LSM 400 from Charleston was where it was commissioned and where it wound up, you know. It was disposed of in 1973 by the Chilean Navy, it said. So they went all over the place, you know. Then the other thing that's the matter of interest, this is the magazine of our association called Alligator Alley, and it is published 4 times a year. This is the 55th volume of it so far. This one happened to be featuring the ship I was telling you that moved from Omaha, Nebraska to Jacksonville, North Carolina, and it has the pictures of the some of the movement, and they contain stories. To my way of thinking, they were better when they first came out because they were stories about us. Now they put stories about everything under the sun related to wars and so forth, but not necessarily us. But this was showing the picture of the ship being moved from Omaha, Nebraska to Jacksonville, Florida. So that's called the Alligator Alley. And they, members of that association, as I say, I'm a life member of that one too. I decided it was better for me to do that than every year to forget to send in the dues.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now,